Welcome to the Wellness Law Podcast, where wellness and the law meet for contemplation and collaboration. This podcast is brought to you by the Center for Health and Wellness Law. Welcome to the Wellness Law Podcast. And today, my guest is Leanne Webster, who was the Executive Director for the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching for almost a decade. She currently is serving as board chair for the Mission Valley YMCA and is working on another project that she's calling the Outdoor Health Project. And I'm just thrilled to have Leanne because she has been such a mover and shaker in the wellness space. And welcome, Leanne, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me. I've been excited to talk to you all week.
Yeah, well, to start off, could you just please give us a little bit more information about your background and specifically your time with the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching?
Sure. Well, my background, backing up a couple decades, was always in marketing and communications. And then around 2007, I decided that I wanted to shift into the world of health. That had always been a passion of mine. And so I became certified as a personal trainer and also attended Well Coaches, which was a health and wellness coach training program, and then launched a business. At that time, it was called 52 Healthy Weeks. And I started working with women who wanted to improve their health and fitness and lifestyle. And so while I was doing that, I really recognized the fact that there were no standards in place for the profession of health coaching. And I found that that was always a bit of a stumbling block, particularly when I would be talking to people in the healthcare industry, like physicians, nurses, and they would always say, yeah, but anyone can call themselves a health coach. And so around 2015, I started talking to the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. At that time, it was a different name, and learned about the opportunity to get involved. I learned about what they were doing and I applied for the position. And then the next thing I know, I was in the middle of creating standards for the industry.
So you just threw yourself in and said, I want to get involved. And then here you are, you helped create the standards that you saw missing. Now, I'm curious, when you were first recognizing the lack of standards for health coaching, what kinds of obstacles do you think that lack of standards presented you as a personal trainer and someone in the space of coaching?
Yeah, well, particularly, I felt like in personal training, there was definitely the expectation. People were very familiar with the word personal trainer, and in gyms, there is an expectation that somebody does have a certification. So I didn't as much see it as an issue in the field of personal training as I was seeing it in health coaching, particularly physicians. They would ask me, well, did you go to school for that? Is there any training? Show me the research. They want to see the evidence base. At that time, Instagram, Facebook, they were becoming more and more popular. You were starting to see people calling themselves a health coach just because they had a passion for health. And so I just found that there wasn't that credibility that you want to have, particularly when you're talking about a very, very important topic, which is somebody's health.
Yeah.
So it was a real roadblock because I saw it was so obvious to me that a physician the natural progression should be, I want to hand you over to a health coach now who helps you implement what we've just talked about. But that wasn't happening at all. And so I just thought, gosh, this is just such a roadblock for the industry.
And you think that referral from the physician to a coach wasn't happening because of maybe a lack of trust in the coaching industry by physicians in particular?
Yeah, I think it was just a lack of standards, right? And a lack of any formalized training, education, or assessment. Because in their world, that's all they know, right? I mean, you have very clear steps that you need to take in order to become a board certified physician in the United States. And I just saw it as a real roadblock. But then on, stepping aside, like away from physicians, just even in the world of being self employed and wanting to work with individuals who wanted to hire me as a health coach, a lot of times people would say, well, is there any training? Like they want to know about your background, right? And I had gone to well coaches and it was a great school, but again, there was just like no formal recognition that was unified coming from a national presence.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say the desire for standards was not only expressed by physicians and other licensed healthcare providers, but also from clients of coaches that it sounds like they too wanted some reassurance that the person they were talking to had met some sort of credential that was trustworthy.
Yeah. And I would say not always, right? Because a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. But if it was somebody who was coming from a licensed profession themselves, they certainly would ask me questions. So it kind of depended on the individual. But aside from all that, it bothered me, right? That there was not this unified professional organization saying, yes, this person has met these standards. This person is educated. They have been tested. They have been assessed.
Yeah, so enter in the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. That's what you guys are now. Well, you guys, I know you're no longer there, but you know
Right.
that you birthed this whole standards movement for NBHWC, and that's what you're known for is creating the standards, and that a lot of programs, health coaching certification programs, university degree programs seek NBHWC accreditation. So can you talk a little bit about that? What does it mean? What's the process? And when someone calls themselves NB board certified, that's what I hear the industry is.
Yeah.
I'm a board certified coach. What they really mean is I have a certification from the NBHWC. Is that
Sure.
a good way of putting it?
Yeah. And if we can just back up, I'll say I didn't really birth this. I walked into the birthing room, a really dedicated board of directors. Like if you go back to when this organization became a formal nonprofit, which was in 2012, there were about 10 or so board members. They were meeting once a week for more than an hour, a
Wow.
volunteer basis for many years, trying to really build the standards, unify the profession, get all the schools together so that they could identify the knowledge, tasks, and skills that a coach should have. Right. So I walked in right when that process was underway. And then I was the first person they hired. And then I really helped to bring it to life. I also like to give credit where credit is due. Nicole Pope came on board just a couple years after me. And then we created a whole team and really were able to make this thing go. The standards were developed in 2000, or I should say they launched in 2015. And then in 2016, MBHWC created a formal agreement with the National Board of Medical Examiners, MBME. And they are the organization that board certifies physicians. So this was really meaningful because it gave a lot of credibility to what it was that we were trying to accomplish. Then that first exam launched in September of 2017, and coaches were sitting for the exam after attending a accredited program and, getting educated, getting assessed on their skills, then passing the exam, and then they earn the MBC HWC credential. And that credential really serves as the gold standard for the industry.
And it does because I hear it all the time from people who contact me for legal help. If they have that certification, if they have that credential, they will tell me it's one of the first things. I'm board certified. Well, of course, a lot of people get confused when they say that. They think it's equivalent to having a license, for example. And so I have to
Right.
do a lot of education around differences between certification and licensure and what that means for their particular wellness practice. Nevertheless, I mean, it's definitely become an aspiration for a lot of people in
Definitely.
space. So NBHWC accredits programs,
Mhm.
different certification programs, and there's a lot certification programs out there in the wellness space, but just coaching programs, correct?
The whole emphasis is training and education standards for coaching. And those standards are based off of that initial job task analysis, which was identifying the knowledge, tasks, and skills that a coach should have.
And can you just give us like an example of a couple of the standards that NBHWC has for coaches who are board certified that they should meet, they're expected to meet?
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. I know that the standards have been updated and I don't want to give any false information. So I left MBHWC in June of 2024. But as far as I know, one of the main things is that it's 75 hours of training and education, right? And those 75 hours meet different requirements that MBHWC has set, right? So there'll be different topics within that 75 hours. And then in addition to that, people have to have an oral examination, right? Like to show their coaching skills. And so that is an assessment to say, hey, you've been educated. Now put this into practice, right? Show us that you actually know how to coach. And then before someone can sit for the exam, they also have to have 50 coaching sessions in duration of 20 minutes or more to show that they've practiced this and they're getting well on their way to knowing how to be a really proficient coach.
Okay. So it's educational standards, training standards. But I know, having visited your website
Yep. Or
or
their website.
NBHWC website, there's also professional practice standards. So that once you are practicing as a coach, if you are going to identify as an NBHWC coach,
Right.
that you are expected to do things under certain situations. Like, for example, I believe one of the key standards is that you refer out people who
Yes. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that particular professional standard or code of conduct? Maybe that's
Yeah, so there's the code of ethics,
Mhm.
right? Code of ethics that coaches need to know. And it's actually interesting that you bring that up because when I was with MBHWC, there definitely was it's a gray area, right? It's a gray area for a lot of coaches. They don't know exactly when to refer out, or not all coaches, but some coaches, especially that are new, they really aren't sure. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there is a lot of misinformation out there on social media where someone who's a coach perhaps starts stepping into that role of dietitian. That leads to a lot of confusion for coaches. But coaches definitely need to familiarize themselves with the MBHWC code of ethics, know when they are stepping into the role of being a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they need to step away from that, or when the client is getting into that space and they need to say, this is not within my skill set. I am not qualified to do this, and I need to refer you out. Um,
Mhm.
so there's just still, I think, a lot of questions around that with
Yes.
coaches. And I just always encourage coaches to review the code of ethics. Actually, many times I often say, reach out to Barbara Zabawa because she really understands the difference. And now with your new book coming out, it'll make things even more clear for coaches.
Yeah. Thanks for the plug on my book. Yes.
Well, no, it's true though, because I read the book and I think that it really is an area that leads to a lot of confusion.
That would be the bulk of the questions that I get as a lawyer who's practiced in this space for the last 10 years or so. And it's not just coaches, it's also anyone, the wellness industry is coaching is a slice of the wellness industry.
Right. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's many other practitioners who identify as within wellness, but not necessarily as a coach. They do other things. Some of them do things as opposed to talking. And so my because you have such great experience in shepherding these standards and code of ethics for the coaching segment of wellness, do you see any lessons or things that you would like to see in a broader sense for the wellness industry that you've learned from developing and implementing coaching standards, how that could be done in other areas of wellness? And should it be done? I guess that let's ask the foundational question. Is it needed? I think it is, but I want to hear you say what you think. And then how would that happen or how could it happen?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely needed. I mean, there's so many areas of wellness, and then there's new emerging areas of wellness too, right? Where you'll start to see. I'm trying to think of an example. Do you have a good example of an area where you're going to start seeing more and more people popping up as calling themselves something within
Yeah,
wellness?
well, like the whole psychedelics.
I was thinking psychedelics. Yeah. Yep. That is, yes. Yeah. So I
Yep.
see that a lot in California. Yep. And it's definitely like there's the whole psychedelic industry. And then you have people who will call themselves a coach who guide people through this, but there's no standard in place. And that's a very kind of scary area,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
With no like licensure requirements or
Mhm.
standards in place that are being overseen by anyone.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of, as I say in a couple of my articles, there's a lot of different titles people use and they'll couch it within the wellness industry. So there might be a guide or a consultant or a coach and they might deal with certain because there's different dimensions of wellness and well-being. There's the spiritual, there's the emotional, there's the social and
Physical.
physical, intellectual. And so they might find a segment of people that, who are looking for help in one of those dimensions, in one of those types of practices. There's no guide
Yeah.
for them. There's no standards. There's no NBHWC. Let's put it that way.
Right.
There may be certification programs, but there's no way of judging whether that certification program is any good. And so when they come out, they're like, I don't know how to market myself. And I don't know where, who I can help. Because a lot of people in wellness want to help people with certain types of conditions. Like I want to help people who are feeling depressed, or I want to
Right.
help people who are, overweight or, suffering from this chronic condition. And, that in and of itself presents a little bit of a conundrum, but you aren't licensed as a healthcare provider to help in those areas. So how do you navigate those waters? And that's where I just find NBHWC kind of at the forefront of this movement to create some standards, some guidance that people can identify and subscribe to differentiate themselves from the charlatans, from the people who are maybe more fraudulent on social media or just not very competent to do what they're doing. So, so yeah, I hope that we can extrapolate your work at NBHWC into other areas of wellness.
Well, if you look back, and I did some research in this when I was creating a presentation at one point when I was with MBHWC. And if you look back at other professions, whether it be dental hygienists or paralegal or attorneys or physicians, there was a point in time when there were no standards in place and people deemed themselves that
Mm.
said profession. And then that profession gains enough momentum where there is an organizing body that starts to identify what you need to know and do in order to be in that said profession. And then oftentimes that organizes into a trades organization, or, you know, it'll even go up to the government level in some cases, right? But you have to start somewhere.
Mm,
And so I think MBHW has done an excellent job getting this going and creating the standard. And I think, even like, I'm not sure where the yoga industry is right now, but I know the yoga industry has worked to formalize more.
mm,
And even if you look at like physician's assistants and nurse practitioners, that also started somewhere. Medical assistants, right? They all formalized at some point. And so I feel like health coaching we've been on that journey. We'll see, how it continues to develop over time. But it would be great if other wellness professions could follow suit.
yeah. Totally agree. And NBHWC, under your leadership in particular, set a great example and something that I think can be used as a template for other wellness practitioners. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Leanne, for your insight today. I really appreciate it. Before we conclude, if people want to learn more about you and your work, what's the best way to reach out to you?
The best way is probably through LinkedIn right now. And that's just under my name, Leanne Webster. I actually don't have a website right now because I really wanted to take this time and just really get clear about what I want my future to look like. So, I've taken on a couple contract positions, which have been wonderful. I am in the process of developing a company called Outdoor Health Project, but we don't have a website yet. We're just getting going, and, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can.
Well, thank you. And yes, you are pretty active on LinkedIn. At least I've seen you be active, and I will make sure that I include that in the description of the podcast and the spelling of your name so people can find you. So thanks again, Leanne.
Oh, you're welcome, and good luck with your new book. It launches
First,
April 1st.
April 1st, 2025, quick and easy wellness law. No fluff answers to wellness practitioners' most pressing legal questions or something like that.
Well, I look forward to sharing it. I actually think it'll be an amazing resource for people.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Law Podcast. You can find more wellness law resources by visiting the Center for Health and Wellness Law website at www.wellnesslaw.com, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media. Until the next episode, stay well, stay hopeful, and stay legal.